In this lesson, we're going to review how to create a pivot table using data that's spread across multiple sheets. This is a very unique circumstance and one that's not frequently known by users of Microsoft Excel. So let's say that you've got data that's spread across multiple worksheets, but it has a common denominator. If that's the case, and there is that common denominator, you're able to create a pivot table of the data from those multiple sheets. And that can be a very useful way to save time from having to try to consolidate all of the data into one table and then perform the pivot table. So let's take a look at an example. In our example, a financial analyst has information on customers, products, and sales in separate Excel tabs. The financial analyst wants to find out the sales quantity by product and gender. The product sales listing does not have the gender, and the customer's sales listing has gender but does not have the product. Therefore, the goal is to combine the customers, products, and sales data into one pivot table to analyze. So there's a few steps in order to achieve this. First, if we select the data on each tab, what we want to do is we want to create a table for each of them. For example, as shown on the screen here, we're creating a table for the sales data on the sales tab. So if we go over to the sales tab, and by the way, there's 3 different tabs here for the data that we're trying to consolidate. There's the customers tab, products tab, and sales tab. So if we look at the sales tab and look at the data there, and then go to the table design tab, we can see that we've given it the name tblSales. If we go to the products tab and click on it, and then click on Table Design, the top ribbon, we can see that we've labeled that one tblProducts. Similarly, if we go to the Customers tab, we can see that the Customers table is labeled Table Customers. And the way in which you want to label it is just by highlighting all of it, and then you can give it a name. For instance, I can name Table Customers to Table Customers 1 if I want to, and it'll rename it as such. And then if I go back to the pivot from multiple sheets instructions, I can see what the next step is now that I've given a name to each of the respective tables. The next step is to go to any of the tables and then go to Insert, Pivot Table, and then check on Add this data to the data model. So that's the important step. So let's go to the Customers tab. I'm going to go to Insert after highlighting all of the table, and then Pivot Table, and then I'm going to check Add this data to the data model. And the table range is called TBL Customers 1. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And so Excel is going to store that data, and as you can see, the table is embedded within my pivot table, and I'm able to filter based on the headers that appeared within the customers table. So for instance, customer ID, customer name, gender, area, and profession. All of that information appears. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Analyze and then Relationship. From the relationship, I'm going to select New from Manage Relationship. And what I want to do when I'm trying to create a relationship between two tables is find the common denominator. So if I were to look at the Sales and Product tabs, I can see that the common denominator is product ID, which exists within both. So the Sales tab has product ID, the Products tab has product ID, and the Sales tab also has the Customer ID, and the Customers tab also has the Customer ID but doesn't have the product ID. So there's a way in which we're able to align these data tables. If I go back to the instructions, I can see that I need to create a relationship between them. I'm going to go to the sheet, I'm going to go to Analyze, I'm going to click on Relationships, and as you can see, I've set up a couple of the relationships here, but I'm going to delete them and we'll start from scratch. So I'm going to create a new relationship, and I'm going to do it with the products data table and the sales data table. and the common denominator is going to be the product ID in both. I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to create another relationship between the customers data table and the sales data table, but this time linking customer ID. All of the data tables linked to at least one other data table, i.e. product, sales, and customers are each linked to one of the other tables. I can go back to my pivot table that I had originally created and inserted on the Sheet 1 tab, and this was a pivot table of the customers data. And if you look at the top of the pivot table field right menu pane, there's this option called All. So I'm going to click on All, and when I click on All, I can see a few different options appear. I can drag data in from table customers, table products, and table sales. So now I'm in a position where I can create a pivot table which draws on the data from source data, which exists in 3 different tabs: customers, products, and sales. Now keep in mind each of these tables had different information. If I go to the customers tab, it has gender, it has area, it has profession. If I go to products, it doesn't have that information, but it has product type, size, unit price, etc. And on the sales tab, it has sales ID, quantity, etc., which some of the other tabs don't have. So if I go back to my pivot, I can drop down the arrows beside each of the tables that are now available under the All section of the pivot table fields, and I can start to slice the data however I'd like. So let's say I want to show sale information based on the customer ID, and I want to be able to show the quantity of sales as the values, and then along the top, let's say I want to show the products as the columns. I can drag products from a different table into the columns box, and let's say I want to apply a filter from the customers data table for gender and place that above the customer ID row to group different customers by gender. I can do that. So now I've got a list of sales quantities split up by male, female genders, and I've got the product numbers along the top. And if you take a look at the right navigation pane, I'm drawing on 3 different tables here. I've got information from the sales table, I've got information from the products table and from the customers table, all being leveraged in this pivot table that I created without having to consolidate all of the data from each respective tab into one table. So this is a very powerful technique, a way in which you can leverage the data on multiple tabs to create a pivot from multiple sheets. The key here is to draw a common denominator between each of the tabs. All 3 of them don't need to necessarily have a common denominator, but you need to be able to draw a common denominator between 2 of them. So again, for customers, we see it has customer ID, and that exists on the sales tab, and the product ID exists on the sales tab and the products tab, which means there's at least one match between 2 of the sheets, and we can do that, repeat that process for all of them. And the key to making all this happen is by setting up those relationships in the pivot table analyze section in the top ribbon under relationships. Here's another view of the data that I had previously created using the data which exists in the customers, products, and sales tabs. Here I'm summarizing the data a little bit differently, where I'm showing gender along the side without the customer ID and showing the name of the product along the top. So I can do that in my table. The only thing I need to do is just modify what goes into each of the boxes. So instead of showing customer ID, I'm going to show no customer ID. And then instead of product ID, I'm going to show product type for the columns. And that achieves the desired result I was looking for. Hey guys, thanks for watching this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, I'd really appreciate a like and subscribe from you. And if you want to learn more about Microsoft Excel, check out these videos above. And don't forget to check out our website, commercecurve.com, where we have lots of in-depth finance and accounting courses available with full training workbooks. All of our courses come with complete workbooks of lessons, examples, pre-built financial models, and training video. Hope to see you there.